Yeah, it is started, right? Okay. Uh, Good evening, all. This is again from the ISAC student chapter of Sastra, and we have finished 10 sets of talk. We are now on the 11th talk under Alumni G series from a very recent graduate of 2018 batch, Akash, who wants to share his journey and how and what are the takeaway lessons of his journey to the present students. Now, I've already shared the resume and a brief write-up of this talk, so I'm not going to take much delay of this talk and make it more delayed. But the title, if I don't know how many of you have looked into the title. The title actually says that even a very small decimal work done can make a huge difference in one's own progress in life. So with this very short note, I would like to give the system to Akash. Akash, thanks for accepting coming back to share your progress and the journey experience thereof with the students now. You can continue, Akash.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you for having me. It's always nice to interact with the students from the faculty. Let me just share my screen. Okay. So let's actually directly start off. The title, of course, is interesting. I just wanted to demonstrate, well, it's not something new. It's just a mathematical fact. But we always, take these things for granted, and it's always nice to think about these things sometimes. Like the professor said, very small effort can actually go a long way if you keep the effort very consistent, and if you keep at it. So that's kind of what the gist of the talk will be. I'm actually giving away what I want to talk about, but that's the whole idea, right? So let's start with where I am right now. So I just want to explain what I do currently. I'm a PhD student at the University of Twente in the Netherlands. I work in the mesoscale chemical systems group. I started last year in August, and I just qualified my PhD qualifier. I just qualified. So I work on something that's really important to me. So I work on energy and sustainable energy applications in a way. So we know that the world is warming, and we need to move towards more clean sources of energy. And the industry, the chemical industry is a very large consumer of energy, and we need to also look at that point of view, right? So electrifying chemical processes is one such option. So for instance, there's a large push for renewable energy. We want to hook up solar panels and wind energy, and you want to use that energy in an industry. But sometimes when we look at industries, they usually use heat. But there's, of late, there's also a very large drive in electrifying these industries. And of course, there's already some electrochemical processes that are established in our industry, like for instance, the chlor-alkali process or just hydrogen production from water splitting. So I'm currently studying water splitting, so hydrogen production. But the specific thing that I'm looking at is when you have such large factory floors with some stacks of cells, like all of these are just electrolyzers. So when you have such reactions happening, electrochemical reactions, you have bubbles that form on your electrode. So that's the specific topic that I'm looking at. So when you have an electrode surface and then you pass electricity, very simple way of looking at it, then you have a reaction that occurs at the interface, and sometimes you have a gaseous product like hydrogen or chlorine. So why do I have to study this? Because, well, if you have a lot of bubbles that sit on your electrode, that's bad because you're blocking the electrode. If your reaction is photoelectrochemical, then you're blocking the incident light, which means that your reaction doesn't progress. Also, it's very inefficient to have these bubbles just sitting on top of your electrode because they're blocking the flow of ions and current. But on the other hand, it's also good to have these bubbles because they take your product away, the Chatelier's principle. They reduce the concentration of products near the electrode. So my project kind of deals with how to analyze these bubbles and come up with a solution or a general design guideline for efficient electrodes where you can manage these bubbles. So that's kind of what I do. I did not go into much detail, but if you have any questions about this, feel free to answer. Feel free to ask them. I will be happy to answer them. But before we move on to the other part, which is the main part of this talk, but some disclaimers. These things that I'm talking about, of course, I did not know what would work. So when I was doing something, when I was applying for some universities or something, obviously I made a lot of mistakes, and obviously I did not know what's going to work and what's not going to work. So these are all retrospective realizations, which means I did not know that I was doing something right, and I still don't know. For instance, but when I look back, I think I did some things right, and that's what I want to share with you. But of course, we have very unique problems. I don't think I have the same situation as you do, whoever you are. So you have to really explore your own solutions. These are just some things that work for me. They may not work for you. And it's quite likely that you will find yourself disagreeing with some things I say, because these things are very subjective, and I really want to leave it up to interpretation. So feel free to take what you will from this talk, and feel free to interpret it in your way. So my long game, I say it's a long game because for me, it was always, my dream was always to do a PhD. I always was fascinated with research, and this is kind of like my long game. I really did want this for a long time. So of course I did my schooling, and then I chose to do a chemical engineering degree. It wasn't, somebody's probably going to ask me why chemical engineering, and well, it was actually not that much of a conscious choice. It was more of a choice by elimination. I just decided that, well, mechanical and electrical are just too much for me, and I did not really connect with those things. Computer science, on the other hand, I was fairly good at computer science. I still am. I think I can do a lot of coding, and I really enjoy it. But then yeah, I was just like, okay, I don't want to end up in an IT company. I want to do something more than that. And labs always fascinated me, and chemical was kind of the other option. But my journey in Sastra was quite interesting, because when I joined, I had this feeling that I had really let myself down. Not that Sastra is a bad university. It's just that, of course, we almost everybody at Sastra takes the JEE, and they have an okay score, and it's not good enough for you to get into IIT or an IT. But then when I joined, and then on the first day, they said, you have these opportunities here. Okay, so you can get these scholarships. You can go do your semester abroad. And on that day, I decided that this is what I want to do. So, okay, I find myself in this situation. I find myself in, having a very, very mediocre score in the JEE, for instance. But I am here, and I want to make the most of it. So I took a very pragmatic approach to life at Sastra. But the beginning was also quite rocky for me. The first semester, I did not really perform very well. And I think it was just the shock of moving to a new culture, a new situation, away from home, a lot of different things going on. But I think I adapted very quickly and really got a hold of things quite soon. The reality of the situation is that you and I, from Sastra, we are going to be competing with the best, right? Students from IITs, IISCs, all these premier institutions. I'm not saying that their institutions are much better than ours. We have access to quite a large, catalog of facilities, even at our university. And our professors, I can actually attest to this fact that our professors actually know a lot more than sometimes, you find at these universities. But it's not about a comparison, because at the end of the day, you are applying to the same jobs, you're applying to the same positions as these students also. So you have to find a way to make yourself stand out, because for them, just the name of the university will do it. But for us, you actually have to work for these things. So I was always, constantly on the lookout for the next internship. Like there wasn't a semester break where I decided, hey, I just want to go home. Every single time I wanted to always, look for an internship. Whether I found it or not, it's a different story. But, whenever I found some time, I was at ASK, I found some professors who were working on some interesting things, and they let me do some work at their labs. And I think this all really added up for me, because I was always constantly thinking about research or constantly doing research, even if it was at a low level, because obviously I wasn't knowledgeable enough to do very high-scale research at that point. But I was still in a lab. I was still putting myself in situations where I could learn something new. So Sastra was, Sastra gave me a lot of good goals like these, and they kept me very busy. But more importantly, for me, the extracurriculars that I was part of, they kept me sane, because if I wanted to do all these things, I wanted to spend all this time in labs and studying and writing and reading stuff, then I would have gone crazy. But thanks to the other things that I did, like I was part of Communique, for instance. I really like English. I'm passionate about it. I was making music with my bands. I like to travel, take some time off during my vacations, travel, and I have a blog and I write stuff. So these things are, what really kept me going through these busy times. So the thing is, I did not have more time than anybody else. I had the same amount of time, but I still ended up, I think, doing a little bit more than most people. Of course, there are people who did much more than I did, and they're much more successful, but I think I'm a very good average test case, because I don't believe that I'm extraordinary in any sense. So the real reason I was able to do more in very little time was because I always used to plan my stuff. So I really like having a calendar application. It doesn't matter if it's an application or if you just write it down somewhere, but I really like having everything put down. Like I like to, see what I want to do. So this works for me on two levels. One, I know I have to do something. And two, if I don't do something, like for instance, if I say here, this is actually from my calendar from when I was at Sastra. And if I say I had to study conduction basics, I'm assuming that's heat transfer. If I did not study it at that point, then I will still be able to look at this appointment that I made and say, hey, okay, I did not study it. I said I would, but I did not. So that's kind of an internal pressure for me to study or do something that I said I would do. So I really recommend that if you don't take anything else from this talk, I really recommend that you also keep a calendar like this, because I think it really helped me, because you only have so much time. I slept a lot. I slept 8 hours in my room, and then I used to sleep in class. My classmates, I'm sure they will attest to this fact that I used to sleep quite a bit in class. And sometimes the professors did not like it, but yeah, of course, it's part of.
Sorry to interrupt, but I would like to add on here that if others sleep, they can be identified. But if Akash sleeps, no one can identify, because he has his eyes open. So he'll be still in this.
Yeah, I think that was a running joke that I never used to get caught sleeping in class because I had my eyes open somehow. But I don't know, maybe I should also take another class on this technique of sleeping in class. I'm not sure if the professors would like that very much, but but yeah, sure. Yeah, the point is, I wasn't much different from any of you guys. I mean, I'm sure you guys do the same. You guys have the same problems that I faced, and more or less, right? You still had the same workload or same more or less same goals and stuff, right? So I think you should be able to really relate to what I'm talking about, especially because of these things. I'm just an average guy who did more, slightly more. So when it came to applying for a semester abroad, once again I used my planning. So this is actually, many of the professors and students, they don't know, but this is kind of the reason why I used to sleep in class. Because I used to spend my after hours emailing people. So I had to find a semester abroad, a professor who would take me for a semester abroad. So by the end of my third year, I think I already had my GRE and TOEFL scores. And I started emailing people saying, hey, I want to do a project here. I want to do a project here. So at the end, before I found Miguel from New York University, who agreed to take me, before I found Miguel, I had emailed 60 professors approximately, 70 professors maybe, and I sent a total of 250 emails. And I had this, so there you can see a snapshot of the Excel sheet. I used to keep this Excel sheet very meticulously, and it's important for me because I was sending maybe 20 emails a day, and I had to know who I had to remind and when I had to remind them. So these kinds of tasks you can always automate, and you don't have to do these things manually. You can let the program do it for you. So this was also in another way very useful for me, because I was able to find out who is who in the field. Like these are all targeted, they're all in one field, and I was reading all these research articles from these people, and I knew already that these are the people that are working in such and such aspects of the field. This actually helps me right now because I'm still reading the same papers. I still work in the same field, and it's quite useful to know who is doing what. And for collaborations or just emailing somebody for doubts or questions regarding papers, it's always quite useful to know. So if you are applying for a semester abroad, or even if you're not applying for a semester abroad, if you just want to do an internship in India, I suggest you have a list like this. You have to have some organization, and I think it really helps, because it helps you visualize how much effort you've taken. And even if you don't get a position, you can always say, hey, look, yeah, I did do my best. And other than that, you also you can always send reminders and stuff. That's very important. People always don't usually respond in one email. I never got a response in one email. Interesting fact, I think the response rate was about 13% for the emails that I sent. So if you don't get responses from professors, don't get disheartened. It happens to everybody. So semester abroad, they actually offered me 2 positions from Sastra, but I declined them because I said, okay, these are not the fields that I want to work in, and I'm going to try to find my own professor who will work in the same field. Eventually, I found Miguel who works in photocatalysis, but it was kind of a high risk, high reward gamble, because I also opted out of placements because I knew that it was going to take my time away. So here, I think I would say, make smart choices, see what your risk levels are. If you really know that you want to do something, then you might as well put 100% for that, and not spend any time on anything else. So at the end of the day, think of it like this. I am telling you a story. It's my story, but that's all we all are. Like, we are all just stories in the making, and you have to really think about what your story has to be. And you cannot have a book where the protagonist is a super spy and also at the same time a Roman gladiator. It doesn't work out. So you have to pick the plot. So if you have to pick a plot, then you better pick it early. So I don't recommend doing this specific thing that I did, where I put myself in a corner and said, SAP is the only thing I will do. I won't do anything else. It's actually a very bad idea. So I don't recommend you do it. But on the other hand, it's also good to narrow down your options and have a clear head. Like, don't say, hey, I want to take GRE, GATE, and also something else, GMAT, for instance. You cannot do everything. It's just impossible for people to work on more than 2 things at a time. It's just very hard. So try to limit your options, but not so much that you're in a corner like I did. So then I came back to India, and I realized my profile was not strong enough for a PhD application, and I knew that I did not want to do a master's. If I wanted to apply for a direct PhD, then I had to have more research experience. I was making a paper from my work at NYU, but the thing is, so here, actually, very interestingly, I said I like to travel, and so the project associateship I got in IIT Madras was in the polymer engineering lab with Dr. Abhijit. He actually, I think he came, Professor Abhijit, he came to Cape, I think, right? And so the story behind that is basically, I actually did an internship with him before. And the reason I did the internship is because I think Naren sir was like, okay, you like to travel, so the internship involved going to Rameshwaram and staying there for some data collection. So Naren sir was like, okay, yeah, I know you like to travel, so maybe this is a good fit for you. So that actually came back to get me this other position later, because the professor already knew me, and it's always much easier when you know people and you already worked with them. They're more willing to give you a position or take you up. So in a similar way, when you look at the current position that I have, PhD position that I have, this was actually strongly, I mean, dependent on my supervisor for my thesis, Miguel. So he was the one who said, hey, there's a position here, and you can apply. And so I think what I'm trying to say is, people and connections that you make are very important. It's not just that you go and meet people and do stuff, but you also have to make a personal connection, and you have to impress upon them that you are capable of doing something that you want to set out. Like, so let's say I always had a PhD in my mind, and I always talk to Miguel or to Abhijit sir about the fact that I want to do a PhD. And it's not just that I talked to them about it, but on some level they also believed in me, and that's quite important, because then they will help you. If you have people that can see that you're making an effort, they will always try to help you. And I have the feeling that people are generally good. They're always nice people, and people always help people who are trying hard. So try hard and try to make connections with people. So the thing with applying for PhDs, I actually applied to other universities in the US, and I got accepted in one university, University of Illinois Chicago, but I turned it down for University of Twente. There are some differences between a PhD in the US and in Europe. I will get to that later. But one of the questions they asked me during my PhD interview here at Twente was, why don't you do a master's? Well, for me, it was just a simple matter of economics. I said, okay, I don't want to spend money on a master's. I cannot do that right now. So I really need a fully funded PhD position. And that's all I'm willing to take. So this is, again, a very personal choice, because depending on your position, it's always easier if you have a master's degree. It's easier to, because also then you have more time to make connections, like I said, and also you would have more output. But a PhD without a master's is not very common in Europe, but it is pretty common in the US. So depending on what you want to do and what your situation allows you, then you have to take a decision on these things and apply. So the 8 universities that I applied to, they were very ambitious, but I am glad to have tried. But again, I think this is a really big mistake that I made, because I really, based on my GRE score and based on the fact that I have some research experience, I was applying to schools that are in the top 20, let's say, like for instance, MIT or Caltech. But these universities also typically don't take a lot of PhD students in. Well, MIT does, but Caltech is a very small department. And some other universities where they have a really strong preference for American graduates. And it wasn't very thoughtful to have applied to these universities. I mean, very ambitious, but I'm glad I tried, but I don't think you guys should make the same mistake. I think some other alumni also talked about it. Make realistic assessments of yourself. Talk to your seniors, talk to people, and get an opinion on how strong your application really is, and apply to universities based on it. Always have some safe universities. So I think the reason I'm actually doing a PhD here is because, well, I did a good interview, but also mainly because I had really strong references from the professors. So I really have to thank them for giving me the platform. So the gist of the thing, the gist of the story that I just came up with is play the long game, which means have a long-term goal and think of your life as a story and think of what you, the protagonist, should be doing. What kind of story do you want to tell people in 10 years, in 2 years? Doesn't matter what's the timeline, but always have a long-term goal. If you don't have a long-term goal, then I suggest you really sit down and think about these things, like, hey, what makes me happy? What's really important to me, and what do I really want to be in some time? I think knowing what you want to do really solves most of the issues, but also eliminating things that you don't want to do is important. Is equally important, if not more. And always try to work on one thing at a time. I think we are terrible at multitasking and doing stuff at the same time. We're just very bad at it historically. Maybe you are personally better, but I think average person is very bad at doing more than one thing at the same time. And always have a plan B. It's very unlikely that your first plan will work unless you are very intelligent, or you just have very good luck, or you have been working extremely hard. It's very, very difficult for the plan A to work. Always need a plan B. Always have, think about whatever can go wrong and then plan for it. It's very important to have a plan and be, just generally pessimistic a little bit, I would say, because then you are, more prepared, I would say. Be open to deviations. Don't always try to stick to one field. For instance, I tried to do that, but at some point, for instance, with my work at IIT Madras was completely not related to electrochemistry, which is what I'm working on now. But I still took it because I think a position that I got was better than a position that I did not have. So take what you get. At some point, you have to say, hey, this is it. This is the line. If I don't get a position in the field that I want by this date, I'm going to take positions that I get. So be open to these kinds of deviations. But at the end of the day, what really matters is what makes you happy. And if you don't get satisfaction from what you do, then it's very hard. And this is especially true for PhD or research in general, because I know some people are wondering, should I do a PhD? Or how do you choose to do a PhD? And the real answer is, I think for me, to do a PhD, then you really have to be happy doing research. You have to have that curiosity for things. It shouldn't matter to you what you're working on. If you come up with a problem you want to solve it, yeah, of course you have some affinity for a field, but I think successful PhD students, from what I've seen here at Twente or even in New York, the successful PhD students are those who know that it's curiosity that drives them, and they're happy to solve a problem as long as they have a problem to solve. So to really work on, figuring out things like what's my plan long term and what do I, need, what makes me happy. So another common question that I also dabble with: does your GPA matter? At some point I was like, my GPA matters a lot to me, but does it matter to people who are evaluating you? Because that's very important. Right? But at the end of the day, you don't have any really good metrics for evaluating an applicant. So if you're applying to some place, all you are is just a sheet of paper and some numbers on it. That's all they have to make a decision based on, right? So on that angle, GPA does matter, because at the end of the day, that's the number that you get from your degree. So GRE doesn't really, compensate for a GPA that's lower or higher. Doesn't really matter. There are two separate things. GRE is an aptitude evaluation, whereas your GPA is more about your academic intelligence. But of course, you should also recognize that high GPA doesn't mean you are intelligent, or doesn't mean that you know what you're talking about. I have to also mention here is the difference between knowledge and skills. I see a lot of master's students, I've seen a lot of master's students and even some PhDs who have a lot of knowledge. They've taken all these courses and they have really high GPAs and they know what they're talking about, but they don't know how to use a pipette. So if you don't have the skills, it really does not matter if you have the knowledge, because you're not going to be able to apply that knowledge. So try to, if you really want to do research, for instance, try to go work in a lab at ASK. Go spend some time in a lab every week. Try to learn the basics of what lab work is, or try to learn what research ethic is. And if you want to work in the industry, for instance, then try to go do more IPTs. Try to spend time at the place and learn skills, not just concepts. Because at the end of the day, it really matters that's what separates people who qualify their PhDs and who finish their PhDs and who don't finish their PhDs. Is that sometimes you just don't have the skills, and sometimes your PhD demands a lot from you, because sometimes the skills that a certain PhD will want are very specific, and if you don't have them, then you're probably not going to finish unless you pick it up really fast. Of course, there is time to pick it up, but generally a good idea to already know some stuff, already have a good ethics. So the difference between Europe and North America is actually pretty wide. Here in Europe, we don't really have a 5-year PhD commonly. It's usually 3 or 4 years, and there is no direct PhD. It's almost always after a master's, and they expect you to have a master's. The minimum requirement for application is usually a master's, unless they want to make an exception for you, which is not something that I would bank on. I mean, it happens, but quite rare. I mean, I know in my department there are probably 2 people and maybe a handful more in the university, but it's not something that I would bank on. If you want to do a direct PhD, apply to the US or Canada, maybe not Europe. But also the whole environment in the labs is quite different, because here people are just gone by 5. You can't see anybody in lab after 5. And if you are in lab after 5, you actually raise a lot of eyebrows. But in the US, you are more free to work. But also, I think there's a little bit more pressure there. It's more competitive over there, and here we collaborate a lot more, and it's not really competition. You're more open about what you're doing and stuff like that. But the other thing is, moving to North America after a PhD in Europe is quite tricky, because some of the PhDs here don't have teaching components, but it's possible to overcome that. But if you have a PhD from the US, it's easy to move to Europe. I mean, again, it depends on what you want at the end of the day. Then also Europe is not that hard. It's not that hard to stay here after your PhD, for instance. But these are some of the general differences. But you can ask me more if you have some specific questions. So I usually have an acknowledgement slide, and I was thinking about who I should acknowledge, and there's so many people. But of course, the professors who helped me along the way, are really important. The first three are the three supervisors that I have. I work with Han, David, and Jan. Uh, but the professors like Narayan sir, for instance, who helped me find Abhijit sir for an internship, and Abhijit sir who helped me, who wrote the recommendation along with Narayan sir, and Miguel who said, hey, there's a PhD here. If you take one person out of this equation, it doesn't matter. Like I won't be here at University of Twente doing a PhD if one of these people didn't help. So it's something to think about. I think it makes a lot of sense to me, and it's very important to me that I acknowledge these people. I think at the end of the day, you really have to be thankful for your teachers and really respect them. And I think good things happen to people who respect people and who work hard. And that's it. So if you have any questions.
Hello.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So, yeah. So somebody. Yeah. There are, I think, questions. You can see the chat.
Okay. I noticed an activity in your calendar as internship hunt. Could you elaborate on it? Okay. So I'm guessing from heat transfer it was what fifth or sixth semester, right? So internship hunt, I guess it just means that I was emailing people. So I actually set some time for these things. Actually, if you looked very closely, one of the appointments on my calendar was milk. So it's very trivial to put. It's a very trivial thing to put on your calendar, but I mean, I think that's the level of planning and organization that helps. But in specific, internship hunt was just me mailing professors in India, basically asking if I could spend some time at their lab. I really recommend you do it. I mean, you cannot always bank on somebody to come knock on your door and say, hey, I have an internship, do you want to join? It's never going to happen. So you really have to set aside time and talk to these people, email them, be persistent, and show them that you're interested. So that's what it means. Yeah, internship hunt. Well, no, I don't think I did it on a daily basis, but I did check my emails quite frequently. I was always on edge. I really wanted that response. Yeah, I'd say more of a as needed basis. But every week I would send at least 20 or 30 emails consistently. Did I miss something? No. Okay. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Hello.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think there are. So yeah. Any questions? So I would now ask probably maybe a reverse question. Too much of detailing an appointment, is that required literally?
So that's a really good question, sir, because like I said, some things are trivial and you don't need to plan them. I've realized this more off late, but I think it's more than planning. It's also, like I said, it serves another purpose, which is when you put things down, when you write things down, you're making a commitment. So you're saying, I will do this at some point, if not now, right? And even if you miss out or if you don't complete that activity, then you still know that you did not do something. So I think in that way, it's important to put everything down somewhere. You don't have to have a very meticulously planned calendar, but
yeah,
that was just.
Is that not just a visual effect? So even without putting it down, I know if to my conscience that what I have to do. So it's nothing to do with on the paper. It is to do, I think, more with one's own conscience what is there. Probably writing on paper is just in case if I forget. Suppose I have to call X person and genuinely if I forget, if it is a memory related thing, writing on paper, putting on calendar, all this is all work. But I think when I'm able to remember it on myself and then just say that writing on paper is going to just keep me forced, I don't think, because if I can write on paper, I think I can just keep the paper flipped downside and I did not even see it. So I'm still contemplating. Uh, Instead of making a very detailed plan, rather like how it, because why I'm asking is uh, typically in adolescent age, people might not be able to stick to a very detailed, minute plan, and I see it as to be naturally good because at the adolescent age of 18, 19, 20, the response time to adjust is very, very high. So that means we quickly adjust. Is it clear? We don't require a very huge planning in the back of the mind and all at that age. That age is very, very fast to adaptation. So I think we should have a focus, right? I mean, we should clearly know that where is the focus and the kind of sticking to one's own, I would say, value system of what one is aspiring for. And every other tool is just, every other forms of reminder is just tools, nothing beyond that. That's what, I mean, I just want to know your comments on that.
Yeah, so I actually agree with what you said, because it's at the end of the day, it's only a tool. You can choose to use yourself as the tool that reminds you. But as a teenager and as somebody who just moved into university, I found myself getting distracted quite often. And I think I'm a very average guy. I think I can't speak for more than myself. A very average person, right? So I think most of my peers also had this issue of getting distracted or just having too many things to think about. And it's not about missing an appointment, but it's more about just, yeah, just so many things happening when you're a teenager. And you have to watch that show. You have to watch that series. You also have to study for that exam, and you also have to do all these other things, right? So you have to go meet that person. You have to email somebody.
Yeah, there's a question. You can take that on the chat.
Okay. So Lokesh, is a direct PhD always a good option? Well, that's a very good question. I have to say generally no, it's not a good option. Mainly because I think sometimes what people are stuck with is whether, well, they don't know after a bachelor's if a PhD is for them or not. Sometimes people are still unsure. And in those cases, it's actually a very bad idea to start a PhD. If you're not unsure, then you're not going to make it. But also, it depends on your situation. If you really want to spend, if you can spend money on a master's degree, or if you get a good scholarship somewhere, then I highly recommend it, because you will have more knowledge at the end of the master's. But for me, I think a direct PhD was a good option, because I was always very sure about what I wanted, and it was quite nice. Can you please elaborate what it's like to do a PhD in Twente? Okay, like working hours, professors, living, and so on. Okay. So I actually did not talk a lot about Twente. I actually really like it here. It's a quite a large campus. But population-wise, we're actually the same size as Sastra University. So we have maybe slightly more professors, slightly more researchers, but overall, I think it's quite similar in size. It's a large campus, of course. It's nice. I live on campus, so answering one of your questions, I live on campus currently, but I will move to the city sometime soon. What is it like doing a PhD here? Well, so I really like the system here where people leave at 5 or 5:30, because that's something that I never do. I usually just stay there till 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. And off late, I'm also falling into this pattern of working a little less, being more efficient. But also this whole situation here is quite nice, because they take care of the employees very well. The really good thing about doing a PhD in Twente, for instance, or in the Netherlands in general, is that as a PhD, you're not a student, you're an employee of the university, which means you get all the benefits as any standard employee gets. You get all the access, you get all the health insurance, collectibles and stuff like that. So it's quite nice to be doing a PhD in the Netherlands. I think it's quite there's a lot of funding generally compared to other European countries, even like in the south, for instance. They don't have that much funding, but North usually generally does. The professors are some of the best in the fields, and the facilities are quite world class, really. I mean, we have I have to use
So you have already been to US, right, as
Yep.
part of your SAP. So US and Europe is a very contrast society itself. It's a complete
Yeah.
contrast. So as you have put it, word Europe is some place where they work because they want to enjoy life. Right. They work because they want to enjoy life as such. So that's why Europe is. I think they still preserve that. US is
Yeah.
more or less workaholic, right? And it's more probably more workaholic with the Asian race mixed over there,
Yeah,
right?
it's very very bad. I think some
Right.
Indians when they go to the U.S. they just work even more. I mean, we already work a lot, I think, and then in the U.S. we
So
just
my
work all day.
question to add to Hariharan is having tasted US and having an attribute of being more workaholic yourself, you have chosen a society which actually celebrates life, right? So why this change, or how is this change?
Well, quite simply, like I said, I had an admit from Chicago. I did not choose it. That was mainly because that was mainly oriented towards. I wasn't thinking about life and stuff like that. I was just thinking about the field and what I would be able to work on. In Chicago, they did not have a professor who, well, they had a professor, but he wasn't taking his students at that time. So in the field in electrolysis that I wanted to work on. So that was mainly the motivation behind choosing University of Toronto. But now that I'm here, I can really see that there are a lot more positives here that I did not really consider. But yeah, I think personally, I would prefer to go back to the U.S. maybe at some point, uh, because I think I do relate to that. Because here, like you said, they work so that they can enjoy life later on, like after work. But in the U.S., they work because they love to work. So that's maybe something that uh, I relate to a little bit better. But I have to
Yeah,
see how these things change in 2 years, 2.5 years.
yeah, yeah. Uh, so anything
I would
else
like
in?
to add on to just what Akash said with regard to Lokesh Pandya's question. That is, direct PhD always a good option. So, in case of Akash, he decided he wanted to do a PhD, and he experimented. He put himself into the shoes of work, I mean, industrial shoe, as well as with respect to research. And he found that yes, he is interested in research, and hence he tried for direct PhD. So, do not enter into direct PhD without knowing what you like or what you want to do. So, always try it out and then go for it, right? In my case, I did an internship before joining I'm doing my master's in Australia. So before joining master's, I got an opportunity to work in an industry, like literally working in shifts. And I did it for 4 months, and I'm pretty sure that after I finished my master's, I'm not interested to go into an industry where I have to work in shifts. I'm still interested in chemical engineering. I want to know about different industries, but I'm sure that I will not go into one particular industry and stay in that industry and raise my postings in that industry. I want to explore different industries, but I don't want to work in shift. So accordingly, since my experience helped me in making my decision. So you have to do a research, or you have to do some internship if you want to know if PhD is really what you need to do.
Yeah, actually, I actually never considered industry. I mean, I've never been to a plant, for instance. I always just space. I mean, I just chose the PhD because of the fact that I was just curious about things. I just generally enjoyed staying in a lab or basically living in a lab, right? And I was always thinking about stuff like that, and it just felt very natural for me to choose a PhD. But like Hari says, if you're unsure, then it's always a good idea to like just explore and then figure it out. You always have time. So the other thing that I think people don't realize is that there is no timeline for things. You don't. Nobody says you have to finish a PhD before you're 26 or 28 or something. Nobody sets these deadlines for you. So you have so much time, and I think really people should take a day off, take a year off, to think about these things and explore before starting a very long journey like this. But there's a question from Pooja. I'm working on electrochemistry. How does your bachelor's degree aid your course? Okay. made my work. So technically, we did not learn any electrochemistry in the bachelor's. So this is one thing that came up during my interview. I told them actually that I don't know any electrochemistry and I have to learn it from scratch. But the thing is, the work that I do is not just electrochemistry, but it's very interdisciplinary. It's the intersection of nanotechnology, nanofabrication, and fluid mechanics, computational fluid dynamics, or just in general fluid mechanics in general, and also electrochemistry. So I had some experience working with flow systems before. So my bachelor's thesis was on photocatalytic water treatment, but based on a novel flow reactor design. It was also microchannel. It was also small scale. So that kind of helped. And also, if you think about it, my work at IIT Madras was also in a flow situation, and that also works out. So I think in general, professors anywhere when you apply, they're open to taking people who don't always know everything in advance. The PhD is not just, hey, I started today, I start working tomorrow. You also have time to build your skills, and that's actually a very important part of the PhD here in the Netherlands. You have to show them that you're actually picking up some skills along the way. They don't just want to give you a PhD degree. They want to make you a very skilled person in the field. So the bachelor's component, what helps for me is transport phenomena, for instance. I really liked it. CRE, and I really love these two subjects, and those two are the subjects that are really still dominating what I do right now. The electrochemistry is just a 30%, I would say, but that's something that I learned now, very recently. I'm still learning, of course, and it's not directly from my bachelor's.
Hello.
Yep.
Yeah. So some other question.
Don't think there are.
So this is very nice because you had brought out certain things which you had probably said students should not do. So you learned it from your mistakes. So
Yeah.
that I just want you to reinforce on a slightly different note. I mean, maybe you are telling now that don't do this, don't do like say X thing or a Y thing now to the juniors. But unless they do, how they will learn?
Yeah.
Because probably it did not work for you, I agree. You did X. X did not give you the result that you expected out of that activity. But that is only one part of doing that activity. Are you sure that there is no learning of doing that X?
No, that's true, because sometimes I actually, if you, so one of the things that I said don't do is back yourself into a corner and then say, I will only do SAP, or I will only do one thing. It actually worked out for me, but I'm still saying you don't do it. I mean, it's not just that, from bad experiences that I'm saying don't do stuff. But also, like you said, you do have to do some things to learn. I think sometimes when people tell you don't do something, you actually want to do it more. Also, in my case also, sir, because a lot of professors, when I spoke to them, they said, don't do a direct PhD. It's hard to get a position. And I was like, no, I will do it. Well, it seems kind of stupid if I think about it now, but well, okay, it worked out, but what if it didn't? So there's always uncertainty in our decision making, but it's at the end of the day, it's just a risk versus reward calculation that you'd make. So if you have to make a mistake, go ahead and make it, but own it, because
Fantastic.
make sure that you're making the mistake, and then don't just blame it on circumstances. Don't complain about things. Make a mistake, you pick yourself up again, and then you keep going. You always need to have a goal. That's the thing. So if you have a goal, then even if you make a mistake, even if you have a misstep, then you will always be able to find yourself back, because you have the goal. If you don't have a destination where you're going, then it's very hard to come back to where you were going.
So that's a great point, right? So that means we need to have adaptability. Like if you face with a problem, then we need to know to look back, sit and see where and which step you have gone wrong, and then make sure that that step is needful corrective measures is being done.
Yep.
I think there are there's one question from Akash to Akash. There's so many Akash and Adityas, I still confuse, right? So yeah, Akash to Akash.
Yeah. So did I have to learn any new coding for my current research? Well, so it's kind of tricky question because you don't learn a skill for something, right? You learn a skill period. But currently, the programs that I mainly use are just MATLAB, which is quite commonplace now. You learn Scilab in Sastra, which is good, and I also use Console quite a bit. I learned Console on my own at New York University, but I really recommend you learn as much as you can. Like there is no particular, there obviously you don't know where you're going to work, what you're going to work on. So, but I think MATLAB and Scilab are quite basic. If you know Python, for instance, then that can also be really helpful because you're going to generate data. You have to analyze data on a large scale. Then Python is cool. So yeah, I mean, I didn't have to directly learn a specific coding language for my program, my programming and modeling part. But yeah, I think I might need to in the future. I might need to use something like OpenFOAM or ANSYS for some of my CFD modeling. But in general, I think it's good to have a programming mindset rather than the skill. So it doesn't matter what language it is. It's just saying stuff in a different way. But thinking and like getting the idea, getting the algorithms right, that's the really important part. So if you want to learn coding, then learn the concepts of coding and not a language.
Yeah. Good. So maybe one thought. So you have coursework now in this thing?
So actually, so since I don't have a master's degree, I agreed to do extra coursework. PhD students, PhD candidates at the University of Twente, for instance, or in the Netherlands in general, we have to finish 30 European credits, which is quite small, and most of it you can actually do by just like saying, hey, I published a paper and I can get some credits for that. I supervise a student, I can get some credits for that. They also have courses for PhDs, which is specific like scientific information, research ethics, stuff like this, which are mandatory, and you also get some credits for those things. But yeah, I also take some extra courses, but here it's very personal. There's no set guideline. There's no specific core department course that you have to take. You can choose what courses you want to take depending on what you know and what you don't know and what you need for your PhD.
Okay.
So that's quite nice here. In the US, you have a more rigid system of these are the courses you have to take at the minimum. And then if you want to take anything more, that's fine, but you have to finish these for sure. So for instance, if I was studying in the US, then maybe I have to do a course on I don't know, process intensification, which is not exactly what I'm doing. Not process control, for instance. If I'm not really working on that, then I might as well take a different course, which I have that leeway here in Europe.
Okay.
There are
Good.
some more questions.
There are two questions. Yeah.
Okay, so how was your typical day at IIT Madras? So I think IIT Madras was very fun for me. I had a very good relationship with the lab mates. I always do, but I had a really good time over there. But the research was also quite nice. I really enjoyed the problem. It was not electrochemistry. It was something else. CFD also flow chemistry and colloids. So it was quite new to me, and I learned a lot. But my typical day would be go to work at 10 and then work till 6 with breaks, of course. But I'm not sure what exactly you mean by a typical day, what exactly you wanted to learn, know from me, but yeah. So the other question is, you're working on a mesoscale system. What kind of CFD approach am I using? Okay. I don't know how technical you want the answer to be, but well, I don't think it matters, right? Like if it's a mesoscale system, the reason my system is a mesoscale system is because some features are on the order of microns, and some of them are, some processes occur in the order of nanometers, like the electric double layer, or those things are very small scale, and then flow happens in a larger dimension. But typically what I do is, that's the reason I use Console, for instance, is because it's able to integrate these large differences in the length dimension. But I'm not sure what exactly you mean by what kind of CFD approach. I just use Console multiphysics because we have multiple, we need to account for multiple physical effects like diffusion, migration, reactions happening, and then there's also a pressure-driven flow. So yeah, it's quite challenging to get the right length scale when you're modeling systems like this. But I think again, it depends on what kind of information you're looking for from your model. If you're really looking into the electrochemical aspects, you really want to understand the electrochemical surroundings of the bubble, then you might want to go for something much finer. But if you're integrating your electrochemistry with the flow field, then usually the flow field dominates quite a bit, and the length scales are quite larger. It's still mesoscale. Again, mesoscale is not very well defined. Typically, a couple of hundred microns is still mesoscale. But yeah, that's currently my CFD is mainly on console. But I might have to move to ANSYS. Does CFD in my bachelor thesis, does it make an impact on interview at PhD? Okay, there's two questions there. Can you also tell me, do Europeans prefer someone who would be strong in a commercial software like ANSYS or non-commercial software like OpenFOAM? Okay, those are, well, the second one is a really good question in particular, but let's answer the first one. I think yes, because if I did not know some modeling before I joined the PhD, then I would be like, I don't know electrochemistry, I also don't know modeling. Then it might be like me applying with a very clean slate. I have nothing to offer. So it was very important that I did have something to offer the group. So yeah, I think it did make a difference. But more than anything, I think Miguel's reference was very, very strong, because he was I think he really did believe in me that I can directly do a PhD, and he believed that I was a good fit for this lab in specific. So the open source movement in Europe, I think it's pretty strong. But also, if you're looking at doing very hardcore CFD modeling, what European groups usually have is they have code of their own, which is developed over some 20 years, 30 years in their group. And it's typically just written in some Python or some other language, native language, but not OpenFOAM or anything. But there are, yeah, of course, we always have access to these commercial software. I think here it's more, the research is more pragmatic. Also, you're just doing what you can. You don't need to use OpenFOAM, but there are certain groups, I think, modeling, the modeling groups generally do tend to be leaning towards open software.
Yeah. So let's just wait. I think some other question. Someone wants to ask a question, so we can just otherwise wind up. I think we are close to an hour now. So I think Akash also roamed about almost all the fantastic places in Europe. So that's why somebody would have seen in his photo. I think that is Colosseum, right?
No, that is the Colosseum, but not the one in Rome. It was the one in Verona. Yeah.
It was where?
It was also in Italy. It's also Roman, yes.
No, which place you said? Sorry, yeah, I'm not able to hear it. Was it from Rome?
Oh, no, it was in Verona.
Okay, good. Right. So nice and good. So that's an added benefit of being in Europe. So
yeah, it's a huge benefit.
You will get to see the finest places, and it is all well connected by train, public transport. You don't require a car as long as you are there in the Europe zone, right? And I should tell the juniors, like Akash used to travel with only a pack bag. I do not know how he travels, but he spends months with just one pack bag, and I don't know, sleeping on buses or trains or very, very small, where nobody would have thought how to travel. He will travel and come back. So that is Akash and his journey and his passion for journey. So yeah. So there is one more. Lokesh.
What would be one advice you give to present graduating students given the lockdown? I don't think I'm very qualified, for instance, to give you advice. But yeah, I can imagine it's very hard. But then also I can relate to this. because I guess you are also applying to many places and then you're getting either rejections or no responses. And this is something that I'm used to now, because I used to email all these professors and hardly anybody gave me a response. So the thing is, it doesn't matter if there's a lockdown or not. If you're applying to places, then you continue to apply, right? You still put in a good word. You say, hey, I am interested. Even if they don't have a position now, you can always refer to your previous email. Just say, hey, I already emailed you before. Do you have a position now?
Sorry
So
to
I
interrupt,
guess.
Akash. Just I would like to add on something. So I'm doing my masters, and like you, I would also be graduating during the, recession or once just during the end of the lockdown. So this is probably a good time. You should try to develop some skills apart from trying for finding out jobs. So you can look for some short-term courses related to your field available where you can develop some new skill apart from what you learned in your bachelor's. That would be helpful for your working environment. It would be an added advantage in your CV, right? So this is really a good time for that because not many companies will be hiring new people because they have to train them at the same time. They are undergoing recession. They will not have much orders and they'll not have much production. So they'll try to reduce the people who are working for them rather than taking in new people. So this is a very good time for you to develop your skill sets. So just look for the skill sets that a chemical engineer requires apart from the knowledge that he gains, and try to develop them. See, for some there are companies that give courses or institutes that give courses for developing your skill sets. You can just join them.
Yeah, so I'm not qualified to comment on industry, but for PhD positions, it shouldn't matter. If the projects already have, yeah, if they already have the money, then they will still hire you anyway. So if you're looking
Right.
for a research position, you keep emailing people. And which software would I suggest for structure? Well, actually, I started with C++ and C because I think it gave me a very good fundamental about how to think. But yeah, if you're not very comfortable with it, then just go ahead and learn MATLAB. I mean, it's the universal, or Scilab, for instance, the universal computational tool, right, for research or even in the industry, right? So yeah, I think MATLAB is a good start. Or Scilab.
Okay, so I think it's good time. So may I have some comments from Akash's own classmates? So maybe I'll just begin with. So who wants to give? There are so many of your batchmates today, right? So who wants to give the closing comment for Akash? I'm from the batchmates of Akash. I'm audible. I'm getting confused seeing two screens now.
Yeah, we can hear you,
Yes.
sir.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So who wants to give a closing comment or on this session? I'm not sure. Somebody hearing?
Well, maybe I can go. I
Yeah.
can do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Namrata
so
also there.
Namrata wants
So
to,
yeah,
yeah.
Hari and then
Yeah,
Namrata. Yeah,
no,
Hari, go
let her
ahead.
do it. It's fine.
No, Hari, you do it. It's okay. Followed by Namrata.
Yeah, well, that was very lot of valuable information that we got from Akash, like what he did and what he found. His mistakes he told. So it's
His
if
learnings he
juniors, if you
told.
guys noted it, I think it would be good. Like you can prevent from falling into the pit like Akash did. Some mistakes that he did,
I think
and
it is his learnings.
yeah,
Let us put it that way, not mistakes.
yeah, that's his learnings. He tried something and some of them were successful, some of them was a failure. So at least when if you come up with the same scenario, maybe you can take a decision not to do what he did, right? So that's what I wanted to say. And I've always seen Akash doing some of the other work at room, or either doing some work or listening to music or sleeping. Yeah, he was. I totally regret. I had the time, I know, opportunity to stay in the same hostel with him, but I never spoke to him at that time, like why, how he manages his work, and at least now I came to know like how he does his scheduled work, and it was a good learning for me. I'll follow that in the future definitely. And thanks, Akash, for a good speech.
Yeah.
Great,
Yeah,
thanks.
Namrata. Yeah. I forgot what was the name of the band that Narmata managed to make up for the final year. What is that, Narmata? Narmata, what is
Um,
that band name?
the minimal?
Some
Minimal,
minimal.
Yeah.
Some. I don't know. What was Akash? What is the name of your band?
The one Namrata managed was minimal.
Minimal. Okay. So there was a band. I remember. That's what for the final year KS, if I remember right.
No, it was
Final
Karthik.
year Carpe Diem.
Acha, final year Carpe Diem. Suddenly, I will see at the back side of JNC, Namrata will be there, Akash will be there. I think some easy friends, Vishwanath will be there, and they will be suddenly singing. And I'll say from where the sound is come. So I think that was a successful band, and you got the first prize. I think so, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, good. Yeah, Namrata, manager of the band, come.
Okay. It would be too bad if I wouldn't have spoken about Akash. Just the reference to his scheduling part, even if I had like, hey Akash, let's go out for lunch or something, he would actually schedule it on the calendar. Like, it is on my calendar and I'll be there on so and so date. And it was like, what kind of a guy is this who actually scheduled something like this and he cannot remember or something? But he's like, it's just about commitment. So I would only want to say that whatever however he is, he's like the best person I've ever met, because a person who will always listen and not judge, because I've made like a lot of mistakes in my life till now, but he's still there, and it's just part of learning. So even if you make mistakes personally in your profession or etc., just be there, because someone along your way has to be like Akash, who will always be there. So that's all I want to say. He's a crazy guy in person.
Yeah.
Everybody will like, why are you friends with this guy? I'm like, what is your problem? At least he's not judging me like you are doing. So that's like the best part.
Yes. Good. Good. Yeah. Thanks, Namrata. Right. So anybody from the current batch or the current students wants to speak? Anybody from the current batch, the student, somebody else wants to speak, or anybody else who wants to speak? Yeah, Nandakumar, yeah. Unmute and speak.
Hello everyone. Thank you Anna for your talk, to sharing with us your journey. I remember that when you were in Sastra in your fourth year, you organized meetings with the first year students. It was my first year at Sastra. You and some of other seniors also. I remember you told the same expression 1.1 power something, which leads to some. So you already explained to us long back. So that I remember now. So thanks for that, and thanks for sharing with us.
I actually I'm surprised that you still remember, but okay, okay. Well, maybe now it makes more sense for me to say it now.
Yeah.
So, I think when you said about first year, I vividly recollect. I think Akash was the sole participant, I suppose, in one Cape when he was in first year. Right, Akash?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Suppose, yeah, and he was sitting on the far the left hand side of the auditorium in the third or the fourth row, and then whoever was organizing Cape, they all called me and they said, sir, that boy who is sitting on the third row, he is first year and he has come, right? Then I just told to the then final years, I said, chalo, it's okay, varadana pora appo paathukalam, it's okay, we will see them. Right. So that was my very first introduction of seeing who is this boy. Right. He was the first year, I think, the very sole one candidate, I think, who came for Cape, if I remember, and he also came for an ISHE meeting, I suppose. I mean, ISHE other function. I don't recollect now. But he was a first year student. He just came and said. Then people asked me, should we allow? I said, why not allow? Allow, it's okay. He is ready to come. Let him come and sit. So this is one thing. And another very fine recollection of Akash is when he became the editor. I said, I'm not going to tell you anything, but just one thing. I want something different, right? What you do, how you do, it's just your headache. I'm not going to say only anything that what is could be different in this communique, but I want to see that there should be a difference, and you should bring out that, and that's how I think that communique volume editions also came up. So that's one finest recollection of Akash I just want to make before a closing remark. So anybody else? Okay, so if there are no one else, thank you Akash, and that's a very nice message. All we have to do is just 1% more of something towards our goal. So that's that 1 point, not one, just 1%, hardly a 1% we need to do something towards our own goal, our own aspiration, 365 days. And if you do that, it takes literally a long way to not just reach our aspiration, but indeed we can build our own career in the fashion we dream of. Aspirations all of us have, but how to build aspiration, how to make oneself worthy of the aspirations that we have is something comes from day-to-day planning. So that's very nice of Akash to come and share. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Right. So I'll just stop the recording and thank you all.